Hello everyone, myself Sukrishna. In this video, I am going to explain all the classic Excel activities in UiPath Studio. So let's get started. To work with classic Excel activities in UiPath Studio, we need three prerequisites. One is we need to install Microsoft Excel in your system. Second one, we need to install UiPath Excel activities package from the manage packages. And third one, we need to enable the classic activities in the activities panel. Then we are good to use the classic Excel activities in UiPath Studio. Excel application scope activity. Excel application scope is a container. It will create a connection to the provided Excel path. Inside the Excel application scope, we can do the whatever the Excel operation that you wanted to do on the provided Excel path. Usually for the Excel operations, we would use the Excel extensions like .xls, .xlsx and .xlsm, right? So the classic Excel activities will support these three extensions files. So let's verify these three extensions files using the Excel application code. I have selected .xls file. Inside the Excel application scope activity, I will going to take one log message, and here I am going to mention the message as started. If I run the process and if you find the started message in the output panel, that means the Excel application scope is able to create a connection to the provided Excel path, and inside the Excel application scope we can apply the Excel operations on the provided Excel path, right? So let's run the process and verify the started message in the output panel. We can find the started message in the output panel, right? So that means the classic activities can work with .xls extensions files. Now change the file. Now I have selected .xlsm, that means macro enabled Excel file. Now let's run the process and verify the started message in the output panel. So in the output panel we can find the started message, so that means the classic Excel activities will support the .xlsm file extensions as well. Now I have selected .xlsx file. Let's run the process. We can see started message, right? So this means the classic Excel activities will support .xls, .xlsx, .xlsm extension Excel files. The best part in using the classic Excel activities is even if you open the input Excel file, the classic activities will not throw an exception. So let me show you this scenario. This is the input file that I have provided. I have opened this file, right? Now let's go back to the UiPath Studio and run the process. Let's see what will happen. So it is not throwing any exception, right? So let's make it as a edit mode. Now let's go back to the studio and run the process. So still it is not throwing any exception. Using the classic Excel activities, you can open the Excel or you can keep the Excel in edit mode, so the Excel activities will not throw an exception. Now let's talk about the properties are available for the Excel application scope. Password. In case if the input Excel file is password protected, we need to mention that password here. So let me show you how we can create the password for the Excel. So we need to go to the file, click on info, click on protect workbook, click on encrypt with password. So here we need to provide the password and re-enter the password, click on OK, and let's reopen the Excel file. So it is asking for the password, right? So this password we need to mention here. So before entering the password, so let's run the process and let's see whether this Excel application scope will give the error or not. So the Excel application scope is giving an error because it is a password protected, right? Now let's enter the password and let's run the process. Now it is working fine, right? Edit password. In case for the Excel modifications, if you set any password in the Excel, that password we need to set in the edit password section. We will discuss this edit password in the upcoming videos. Create if not exists means in case if the provided Excel path is not available, and if you enable this option, the new empty file will be created in the provided Excel path. So let's change the file name. So basically this file name is not available in the mentioned path, right? So first run the process and let's see what will happen. It is throwing an exception, and if you open the error message, so it is saying that the provided Excel path was not found, right? So if you enable this option, so the Excel application scope activity will verify this path is available. If available, it will not create a new file. In case if the file is not available, it will create a new empty file with the provided Excel name in the provided path. So let's run the process and verify the output. So now we are not getting any exception, and if you go to the project folder, so the new file got created. So here the empty sheet got created inside the Excel file, right? Instance catch period means how much time you want to Excel session to be alive. By default it is 3 seconds, but if you want you can increase this time. Macro settings. So basically if you are working with macros or VBA, then these settings will be useful. So here we can have three options are available: enable all, disable all, use Excel's existing settings, right? So as per our need we can select these options. Read only means the Excel file will open in the read only mode. So in this case we can extract the Excel information but we cannot modify the Excel data. Save changes. That means in case if you are modifying the Excel data like removing the columns data, removing the rows data, deleting the sheet, renaming the sheet, or updating the cell value, for those scenarios if you enable the save changes, the changes will automatically save. Start as a process. If you enable this option, the Excel file will be opened as a separate process. Visible means the input Excel file will be open and we can see all the Excel operations that we placed inside the Excel application scope. If you disable the visible, whatever the activities that we placed inside the Excel application scope, those operations will be happen at the back end. So we can create the output for the Excel application scope. So here I am going to create the Excel workbook. So in case if you wanted to do some kind of Excel operations on the same Excel in the different workflow, then we can use this Excel workbook variable instead of providing the Excel path, right? So let me show you that option. So here I am going to take another Excel application scope. Usually for the Excel application scope, we will going to provide the Excel path, right? But we can provide the Excel workbook in the existing workbook property, right? So let me take another log message. Here I am going to mention the log message as, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. In the output panel, we can see the two log messages that we mentioned in the two Excel application scopes, right? Read cell activity. If you want to extract any specific cell information from the Excel, we can use the read cell activity. This is the input file that we are going to work. So here I just wanted to extract the PO number from the third row, right? So that means A4 cell value. So let's see how we can extract A4 cell value in the UiPath Studio. So here first we need to take Excel application scope activity. Then we need to provide the input Excel file path. To extract the cell information, we need to take the read cell activity. Here we need to mention the sheet name and the cell number that we wanted to extract. In this case, the cell number is A4. To save the cell value, we need to create a variable. So here I am going to create a variable str cell value. Then I am going to take one log message to display this cell value, right? Now let's run the process and verify the output. The PO number got extracted. Now let's verify this value. So A4 PO259663, the same value got extracted. Now let's see how we can extract the unit price from the first row. That means F2 cell value. So now here I am going to change the cell number to F2. Let's save and run the process. So here we are getting the exception. So basically read cell activity output variable data type should exactly match with the Excel cell value data type. If both are mismatches, then we will get this type of issue. So let's stop the process. In the previous run, so basically we were extracted the PO number, so it is of string type, so we were not get any issue. Now we are trying to extract the unit price and it is of double data type, so that's the reason we are getting this issue. Now let's change this data type to double and let's save and run the process. So value got extracted, so 36, right? So basically, if you know the correct data type, so we can mention the same data type here. In case if you don't know the data type, so simply you can mention the data type as object. So the object will accept all the data type, right? Let's try to extract one more cell value. So in the Excel, I just wanted to extract the received date from the second row. That means J3 cell value. So here I am going to mention J3, right? Let's run the process. So the date got extracted. For the read cell activity, if you see, we have a property use display format, right? This is the actual received date. In case if you wanted to change this date format to another date format, we need to change the cell format. To do that, we need to right click on the cell, click on format cell. So here we can have a multiple date format options are available. As per our need, we can select the date format and then we can click on OK. Then it will change the format to selected date format, right? Now this is the actual value and this is the formatted value, right? Use display format will specify us whether you wanted to extract actual cell value or formatted cell value. So here I have not selected this option. So if I run this process, so the read cell activity will return the actual cell value from the Excel. So let's run the process and verify the output. So the actual value got extracted, but it is showing in the different format. In the output panel, so the date format showing in month, date, year format. In the Excel, the actual date is showing date, month and year. Initially the received date is in the general format, so that is the reason in the first run we are getting the exact text. Now we have changed this received date to the date format, so it is giving us the standard date format, right? Now let's check this option. So now it will going to return the formatted value from the Excel cell, right? So it is returning the formatted Excel value. Read cell formula activity. If we want to know the specific cell formula in the Excel, we can use the read cell formula activity. So here in the Excel file, I have added the formula for the line item total. So the quantity into unit price will give us the line item total, right? So now let's see how we can extract this line item total formula in the UiPath Studio. Here I would like to extract the first row's line item total cell formula, that is G2. So let's go to the UiPath Studio. Take read cell formula activity. So here we need to mention cell value as G2. Then here we need to create a variable str cell formula, right? Then I'm going to add this value in the log message. Now let's run the process and verify. So it got extracted the formula V2 into F2, right? Read column activity. Read column activity is used to extract any specific column information from the input Excel file. So for this activity, we need to mention the starting cell number. From that cell number to end cell number in the same column, the data will be extracted. So the output of the read column activity will be list. So let me create a variable to store the column information, right? So this is the input file. So here I wanted to extract all the pivot numbers information along with the pivot number header. So my starting cell number would be A1, right? So let's see how we can extract all the pivot numbers in the UiPath Studio using read column activity. So let's go back to the UiPath Studio. So here we need to mention the sheet name from which you wanted to extract the data, and then we need to mention the starting cell number. So in this case the cell number is A1, so it is already mentioned, right? So let me take one log message to display the extracted pivot numbers count. So here I am going to mention the expression list column data dot count. So this will give us the extracted pivot numbers count, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. So in the watch panel, I have added the variable list columns data. In the value section, we can find all the extracted pivot numbers. So let's continue. In the output panel, we can see the extracted pivot numbers count. So that is 108, right? In this starting cell, so there is no need every time we need to mention the first cell number in the Excel file. So we can mention any cell number. From that cell number to end cell number in the same column, the data will be extracted. So here I am going to change the starting cell number to A1 to A50, right? So from A50 to end cell, the data will be extracted, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. So these are the extracted pivot numbers, and let's continue, and the 59 pivot numbers got extracted, right? For the read column, we have a property use display format. In the input Excel, I have added the cell format for the receiving date, right? So here, this is the actual date, and after formatting, we have this date, right? So this is the actual date and this is the formatted date. Use display format will specify us whether we wanted to extract the actual values or the formatted values. I have unchecked this option, right? So as I have added the cell formatting for the received date, so let's extract the received date column and let's see how we will get the output. So let's run the process. So in the watch panel, the received date got extracted and we can see the actual date format values, right? And now check this option and let's run the process. Now we have formatted values got extracted, right? Redraw activity. Redraw activity is used to extract any row information from the input Excel file. So here also we need to mention the starting cell number. From that cell number to end row cell number, the data will be extracted. So the output of the redraw activity would be list format. So let me create a variable. So here we need to mention the sheet name from which you wanted to extract, and then we need to mention the starting cell number, right? So let me take log message to display the extracted row data count. So here I am going to mention list row data dot count, right? So in the read row activity, as I mentioned A1 as a starting cell, it will going to extract all the headers, right? So from A1 to J1 data will be extracted, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. In the watch panel, let me add a list row data variable. In the value section, we can find the extracted row information, right? So the total columns 10, right? Now let's see how we can extract the 10th row information. So here I am going to change the starting cell to A1 to A10. Let's save and run the process. So these are the 10th row information. For the read row, every time we don't need to mention A as a starting cell. We can change it to B or C. From that column to end column, the data will be extracted. So here I am going to change the starting cell as B10, right? So that means it will going to skip the P1 number field and B to J details will be extracted, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. So in the value section, if you see the P1 number is not extracted except P1 number, so all the details got extracted. And in the output panel, we can see 9 column details got extracted, right? For the read row also, we have a use display format. So if you uncheck, it will go into extract actual values. If you check this option, it will go into extract the formatted values, right? Read range activity. If you want to extract both rows and columns, we can use the read range activity. The output of the read range activity would be data table. So let me create a output variable dt. So first we need to mention the sheet name from which you wanted to extract the information, and then we need to specify the range. If you mention the range as empty, it will going to extract all the data from the mentioned sheet name. Add header. If you check this option, the first row will be considered as headers, right? Use display format. So this is same like read column and read range. So if you uncheck, it will go into extract actual values. If you check, it will go into extract the formatted values. Use filter. So basically in case in the input Excel, if you have a filters, right? If you uncheck irrespective of filters, the data will be extracted. If you check this option and in the input Excel file, if you have a filters, only the filtered information will be extracted. I will show you this all the scenarios, right? So let me take two log messages to display the extracted rows count and the columns count. In the first log message, I am going to display rows count dt.rows.count .toString. In the second log message, I am going to display columns count So in the read range, I haven't mentioned the any range, so I mentioned as empty. So it will going to extract all the sheet information. Let's run the process and verify the output. So let me add DT variable in the watch panel. So in the value section, if you see the first row information considered as headers, right? And all the information from the input Excel got extracted. So here total rows extracted are 107 and column count is 10. Now uncheck this add header and let's see how we will get the data. So this is the expected information. So the header information showing as column 0, column 1, right? So the first row information also considered as row, right? So in the output panel, so you can see total rows are 108 and columns count is 10. Use filters. First add the filters in the input Excel file. So here I am adding the filter for status. I am filtering the all the received data and save. So now I have unchecked this use filter, right? So that means irrespective of filters, so it will going to extract all the information from the sheet 1, right? So let's run the process. So 107 rows got extracted and the 10 columns information got extracted. So if you check this option, so let's see how many rows will be extracted. So 34 rows got extracted. So if you go to the Excel, 34 rows, right? Now let's add some range and let's see how we will get the output. So here I am going to mention the range as B2 to E10, right? That means, so let me remove the filters. B2 to E10. So this information will be extracted, right? So let's save. So let's run the process and verify the output. So this is the extracted information. We have 4 columns and 8 rows information got extracted. Write cell activity. If you want to write or update the cell information in the input Excel file, we can use the write cell activity. Using the write cell activity, we can write or update the single cell or multiple cells in the input Excel file. In the input Excel file, I wanted to update the first PO number, that is A2 cell number. So let's see how we can update the A2 cell number in the UiPath Studio using write cell activity. So let's go back to the UiPath Studio. For the write cell activity, we need to mention the sheet name in which you wanted to update the cell information, and then we need to mention the range. So in this scenario, the range would be A2, and then we need to mention the value. So here I am going to mention the value as PO hyphen 00000. So let's save the process and run and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file and verify the PO number. So the PO number has been updated on A2 cell, right? Now let's see how we can write the multiple cells using the write cell activity. In the comment section, I wanted to add a simple comment from K2 cell to K10 cell. So let's see how we can do that. Now the range would be K2 to K10. So in the value section, I'm going to mention the simple comment like comments from right cell, and then I'm going to mention the date. Right. So let's save and run the process and verify the output. So the comments has been updated from K2 cell to K10 cell, right? In the write cell activity, we can add a formula and then we can update the cell information as well. In the comment section, I wanted to display PO number and the invoice number, both the values as colon separated. So let's see how we can add a formula in the write cell activity and how we can update the values in the comment section. So here the range would be K2, and here I am going to write in a formula. The formula starts with equal. So the pivot number is available at A column. So here I am mentioning A2, and the invoice number is available at B column, right? So here I am going to mention colon, right? So if I run the process in the K2 cell, we will have a PO number colon and the invoice number, right? So let's save and run the process and verify the output. In the K2 cell, we have a PO number colon invoice number. Data got updated. Here you can find the formula that we have applied in the write cell activity. So as it is a formula, if you drag this line, so the same formula will be applied all the cells in the same column, right? Let's take another scenario. In the comment section, I want to display both invoice number and the status information. So my comment should become like invoice number status is whatever the status is available in the H column. So for this we need invoice number and the status column. So invoice number column is available at B column and the status column is available at H column. So let's see how we can write the formula, and let's see how we can update the cell information. So here first we need to get the invoice number, so that is available at B column, and then here I am going to write a sentence status is, and the status column is available at H column, right? So let's save and run the process and verify the output. So the comments has been updated, right? So if you drag this line, so the same formula will be applied to all the cells in the same column, right? Set range color activity. If you want to add a color in the input Excel file, you can use the set range color activity. Using the set range color activity, we can update single cell color or multiple cell colors. So for this activity, we need to mention the sheet name for which you wanted to add the color, and then we need to mention the range, and then we need to select the color. So here I want to add a color to the B2 cell. So in the range section, I am going to mention B2, In the color section, I am going to write an expression system dot drawing dot color. So here we have a list of colors are available. So we can choose whatever the color that we wanted to apply on the mentioned range. So here I am going to select the color green. So let's run the process and verify the output. We have added the green color to the B2 cell, right? So let's open the input Excel file. So the green color got applied to the B2 cell. Now let's see how we can add color for multiple cells. So here I want to add a color from A5 cell to K6 cell. So let's see how we can do that. Here my range would be A5 to K6. So here I am going to change the color from green to yellow. Now let's run the process and verify the output. So the yellow color has been applied from A5 cell to K6 cell. Right range activity. If you want to add data table data in the input Excel file, we can use the right range activity. To get the tabular information, I am referring the BSc application. So let's see how we can extract this tabular information and then how we can add this data in the input Excel file using the right range activity in UiPath Studio. So let's go back to the UiPath Studio. So the first thing we need to extract the tabular information. For that I am using the table extraction. So select any cell, click on S. So all the tabular information will be extracted. Click on save and close. Now we have extracted the tabular information from the BSc application. Now we have a data table is available. So let's see how we can add this data table information in the Excel file. To work with Excel, we need to use the Excel application scope activity. So here we need to mention the input Excel file name. So I have mentioned the file name as testing.xlsx. So basically this file is not available. So as we select this create if not exist, so the new empty file will be created with this name. To add the data table data in the input Excel file, we need to use the right range activity. For the right range activity, we need to mention the sheet name and then the data table variable name. And then we need to select the starting cell number. So whatever the cell number that we mentioned here, from that cell number, the data table data will going to be add in the mentioned sheet name, right? For the right range activity, we have a property add headers. If you select this option, along with the headers information in the data table, the data will going to add in the input Excel file in the mentioned sheet name. If you unselect in the data table all the rows information except the headers, the data will going to add in the input Excel file in the mentioned sheet name. Now I have unselected this option. So let's run the process and verify how we will get this data table information in the input Excel file. So let's run the process. The process execution has been completed. So let's verify the input Excel file. So the testing Excel file got created. So the sheet 1 got created and inside that the extracted BSc information has been added without headers, right? Now select this add headers and change the sheet name. So now I have mentioned the sheet name as sheet 2. So now let's run the process and verify the output. Sheet 2 got created and we have all the headers and the row information, right? So in the starting cell, so basically we can mention whatever the cell number, right? On that cell number, the data will go into add. So let's see this scenario. So here I am going to mention the starting cell number as E5, right? And I am going to change the sheet name. I am mentioning the sheet name as sheet 3. So let's run the process and verify the output. Sheet 3 got created and data has been added from E5 cell, right? So for the write range activity, basically we need to mention the sheet name, right? In case if the sheet name is already exists, the mentioned data table data will going to override in the input Excel file in the mentioned sheet name, right? So here sheet 3 is already available in the testing.xlsx file, right? Now let's change this starting cell number to A2, right? And let's run the process and verify the output. So the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. So the data has been added from A2 cell, right? So earlier the data has available from E5 cell. So earlier we have headers information is available in the fifth row, right? Now this information overrided with input data table that we mentioned in the write range activity, right? Append range activity. If we want to append the data table information in the input Excel file, we can use the append range activity. So here I have created simple data table containing ID and name. So let's see how we can append this data in the input Excel file. To append the data table, so we need to use the append range activity. So here we need to mention the sheet name and the data table. So in the append range, again here we have two things. If the mentioned sheet name is already available in the input Excel file, the data table data will go into append from the last empty row in the mentioned sheet name, the input Excel file. If the sheet name is not available in the input Excel file, the new sheet will be going to be created and the data table information will going to add from A1 cell. So I will show you these two scenarios. This is the input file that I have mentioned. So here we have only sheet 1 available, right? So if I run the process, the data table information will go into append from the last empty row in the sheet 1, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. So the data table data has been added from the last empty row, right? So here only sheet 1 is available, right? So let's add a different sheet name which is not available in the input Excel file. So I am mentioning sheet 2. So if I run the process, the sheet 2 will go into create in the input Excel file and the data table data will go into add from A1 cell. So let's run and verify the output. So sheet 2 got created and the data has been added from A1 cell, right? So as we are modifying the input Excel file, we need to talk about this edit password option. In case if you set the password for the modifications in the input Excel file, we need to enter that password in this edit password section. So first let me show you how we can create the password for the modifications. So in the input Excel file, click on file, save as, click on more options. So click on tools, select general option. So here we have an option to set the password for the modification. So enter the password, re-enter the password, click on save. So let's reopen the Excel file. Now it is asking for the password for modifying something in the input Excel file, right? So that modification password we need to mention here. If you are not mentioning, then we will get the exception. First, run the process without entering the edit password. So let's run the process and see what will happen. So it is asking us to enter the password manually, right? So as we cancel to enter the password, so we are getting the exception. So entering the password every time manually, it is not possible, right? So here I am going to mention the password and verify the output. Now it is not asking for entering the password manually, right? So let's go back to the input Excel file. Now the data has been appended in the sheet 2, right? Delete range activity. If we want to delete cell data in the input Excel file, we can use the delete range activity. Using the delete range activity, we can delete single cell data, multiple cell data, column data, and row data. This is the input file. So here I wanted to delete single cell data, that is B2 data. So let's see how we can delete this B2 cell data in the UiPath Studio using delete range activity. So let's go back to the UiPath Studio. For the delete range activity, we need to mention the sheet name in which you wanted to delete the cell data, and then we need to mention the range. So here in this case the range would be B2. So let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. So the B2 cell data has been deleted. Now let's see how we can remove the multiple cell data. So here I want to delete the cell data from B3 to F5. So let's see how we can do that. Here the starting cell range would be B3 and the end range would be F5, right? So let's save and run the process and verify the output. So let's open the input Excel file. So the data has been removed, right? Now let's see how we can remove the entire column data. So here I wanted to remove entire invoice number data, that is B column. So let's see how we can do that. So here we need to mention B:B. So let's save and run the process. So let's open the input Excel file. So the data has been deleted, right? For the delete range activity, we have two properties, shift cells, shift option. So after deleting the cell data, basically we have empty cells, right? If we want to fill these empty cells, we can use these options. In the shift option, basically we have four options are available: shift up, shift left, enter row, enter column. So let me show you these options manually, and then we will execute in the UiPath Studio. So let's say you are selected the shift option as shift up. Okay. So if you delete the cell, that is C8, the below column data will move to the upward direction. And if you select shift left, if you delete the cell H8, the right side of the row data will move to the left direction. If you select entire row after removing the row data, the below row data will move to the upward direction. So let's say here I removed the ninth row, right? So the below row information will move to the upward direction. Entire column. So if you remove any column, let's say the status column, if you remove, the right side of the column data will move to the left side, right? So to work with this shift option, first we need to check the shift cells checkbox, and then we can work with these options. The first option, shift up. So here I wanted to delete the data from B2 to B5. Okay, so let me open the input file one more time. So this data will be deleted, and the remaining data will go to the upward direction. Okay, so let's save and go back to the UiPath Studio. Let's run and verify the output. So let's open the input Excel file. So the data has been moved to the upward direction. For the same thing, so if you select the shift left, then the right side of the row data will move to the left side. So let me give a color to the row. Save and run the process by selecting shift left. So let's open the input Excel file. Data has been deleted and the remaining data has been shifted to left side, right? Entire row. If you want to delete any single row, so let's say seventh row, in the range section we can mention any cell number in the seventh row. You can mention A7, B7, C7, or you can mention A7 to B7, A7 to D7, something like that. So let me show you how we can delete this single row. So here I am mentioning B5. So before that, let me give some color to the rows. So it will going to delete this row, right? So here I am giving green color for remaining. Going to give this color. Okay, let's save and run the process. So let's open the input Excel file. The row has been deleted and the remaining row information moved to the upward direction. Now let's see how we can delete the multiple rows. So let's say I wanted to remove the rows 5th row to 7th row. In the starting range, we need to mention any cell number in the 5th row, and in the end range, we need to mention the 7th rows any of the cell number. Okay, so let's go back to the UiPath Studio. So in the range section, the starting index I am going to mention C5, and the end index I am going to mention A7. Okay, so let's run the process and verify the output. So let's open the input Excel file. So the data has been deleted and the below rows has been moved to the upward direction, right? Now I wanted to delete the column data using the entire column shift option. Okay, so here I wanted to delete the status column, that is H column. In the range section we need to mention any cell number in the H column. You can mention H1 to H11. Okay, so after that then the received by received date will be shifted to left side. So let's delete this status column. So here we need to mention the range as H5. So you can mention H1, H2 or something like that. And then we need to select entire column, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. The status column has been deleted and the received by and received date has been shifted to the left side, right? Get selected range activity. If we want to get active sheet selected range in the input Excel file, we can use the get selected range activity. The output of the get selected range activity is string. So let me create a variable. So let me take one log message to display the output. This is the input file we are working on. So here I am activated the sheet 1 and I am selecting the range from B2 to G7, right? So let's see how we can extract the selected range in the UiPath Studio. So let's go back to the UiPath Studio. So let's run the process and verify the output. So if you see the output panel, so we have a selected range B2 to G7, right? Now I have activated the sheet 2 and I have selected the A1. So let's run the process and see how we will get the selected range. So the output is coming as A1, right? Now I am selecting the sheet 3 and I have selected the range from B7 to B14, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. In the output panel, so we can see B7 to B14 as a selected range, right? So this way we can get the selected range from the active sheet in the input Excel file. Get workbook sheet activity. If we want to get the sheet name in the input Excel file based on the index number, we can use the get workbook sheet activity. The output of the get workbook sheet activity is string. So here I am going to create a variable. In the input Excel file, we have 5 sheets are available. So let's see how we can extract the sheet 1. So basically the index will start from 0, right? So if you want to extract sheet 1, the index would be 0. So here I am going to mention the index as 0. So let me take one log message. So let's pass the variable name. So let's run the process and verify the output. Sheet 1 name got extracted. If we want to extract invoice sheet name, then we can pass index value as 4. So let me pass index 4 and let's run the process. Invoice sheet name got extracted, right? In case if you pass the index number greater than the number of sheets are available in the input Excel file, we will get the exception. In the input Excel file, basically we have 5 sheets are available, right? So in case if you pass the index number greater than that, we will get the exception. So I have passed the index value as 8. So these many sheets are not available in the input Excel file. So if I run the process, so we will get the exception. As we pass the index number greater than the number of sheets are available in the input Excel file, we are getting the exception, right? Get Workbook Sheets activity. If we want to get all the sheet names in the input Excel file, we can use the Get Workbook Sheets activity. The output of the Get Workbook Sheets activity is list of string. So let me create a variable and let me take one log message to display the output. So in the log message, I will going to display all the sheet names as comma separated. For that, I am going to write an expression string dot join, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. In the output panel, so we can see all the sheet names are available in the input Excel file, right? Autofill range activity. Based on the single cell or multiple cell formats or formula, if we want to autofill the other cell data in the input Excel file, we can use the autofill range activity. So first, let me show you how this autofill functionality will works in the Excel file. I have opened the input Excel file and I am in the sheet 3. Here in the A2 cell number, I have mentioned the value 10. If I drag this line, so it automatically populated the value. Basically, in the A2 cell number, we don't have any formats or formula. So that's the reason it is just copying the same value in the remaining cells. In the A3 cell, I am going to mention the one more value 12. So if you see here from A2 cell to A3 cell, the number is incrementing with 2. If I select these two cells and if I drag this line with increment of 2, the next numbers will automatically generated, right? So this way the autofill functionality will works in the Excel file. So let's go to the sheet 1. Here I have mentioned two dates, received date and PO created date. When you work with autofill functionality, the cell format is matters. So here for the received date I have mentioned the cell format as date, and for PO created date I have mentioned general format. If I select this J2 cell, that is the received date, and if I drag this line, so it automatically increment the date. But if I select the C2 cell, that is the PO created date, if I drag this line, it will increment the last number, right? So when you work with autofill functionality, we should take care about this cell formatting. Now let's see how we can autofill this received date till J15 based on the J2 and J3 cells. So basically from J2 to J3 the date is incrementing with 2, right? So when you invoke this autofill range activity in UiPath Studio, the next date should be increment with 2 and it should fill till J15, right? So let's go back to the UiPath Studio. For the autofill range activity, we need to mention the sheet name in which you wanted to work. So we are working on sheet 1 only, so I'm not doing any changes here. Then we need to specify the source range. So in this scenario, the source range would be J2 to J3. And then we need to mention the destination range till at what cell you wanted to autofill the data. We might think the destination range should be after the source range, like J4 to J15. But this is not a right way to declare the destination range. The destination range should always start with the source range starting cell number, that is J2. Otherwise we will get the exception. So let me run the process. Let's see whether it will going to autofill the data or it will give the exception. We are getting the exception, right? So let's stop the process and change the destination range from J4 to J2. Now save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. The data has been autofilled, right? In the P1 number column, I have mentioned two P1 numbers. First P1 number ending with 51 and the second P1 number ending with 55. The difference is 4, right? So let's see how we can autofill this P1 number till A15 by using the A2 cell and A3 cell numbers. So here in this case, so the source range would be A2 to A3 and the destination range would be A2 to A15. So let's run and verify the output. So the remaining cells has been filled with the P1 number by incrementing 4 number, right? For the line item total for G2 cell, I have applied the formula E2 into F2 equal to G2. So that means quantity into unit price will give us the line item total. So let's see how we can autofill this line item total based on the G2 cell. So before that, let me remove the cell data. So let's save the file and go back to the UiPath Studio. So here the range would be G2 and the destination range would be G2 to G15. So let's run and verify the output. So the formula has been applied till G15, right? Copy and paste range activity. As its name says, if we want to copy and paste the data in the input Excel file, we can use the copy paste range activity. In the input Excel file, I wanted to copy PO number and invoice number in the sheet 1 and I want to paste in the sheet 2. So let's see how we can do in the UiPath Studio using copy and paste range activity. In the sheet name section, we need to mention the source sheet name where you wanted to copy the data. And then we need to mention the source range. So in this case, I'm mentioning the source range as A1 to B15. And then we need to mention the destination sheet name where you wanted to paste the data. So I mentioned the destination sheet name as sheet 2 and then we need to mention the destination cell starting cell. So I'm mentioning the A1. So if I run the process, so it will going to copy the data from A1 to B15 in the sheet 1 and then it will go to the sheet 2 and then it will paste the data from the A1 cell. So let's run the process and verify the output. So the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. So in the sheet 2, we have a PO number and the invoice number data has been copied. For the copy and paste range activity, we have a property copy items. So here we have few options are available: none, value, formula, number format, cell format, and all. Right? So if you want to copy the data including values, formulas, all the formats, so you can choose the all. But in case if you want to copy only values or only formulas or only cell format, then you can choose these options. Lookup range activity. If you want to search any value in the input Excel file to know the first matched cell number, we can use the lookup range activity. For the lookup range activity, we need to mention the sheet name in which you wanted to search the value, and then we need to mention the value that you wanted to search in the input Excel file. Then here we need to mention the range. In case if you are not mentioning the range, the mentioned value will be searched in the entire sheet data. The output of the lookup range activity would be string format. So let me create a variable str match cell number. So let me take one log message to display the output. Right? So let's run the process and verify the output. So the process execution has been completed. So in the output panel, we can see the matched first cell number as B2. So let me open the input Excel file. So in the B2 cell, we have a 70 number is available. Basically, the lookup range activity will not look for the exact match. It will use the contains operator. If any of the cell number contains the mentioned value, then it will return the first occurrence of the cell number. Now let's see how we can set the value in the column wise. So I wanted to search the value in the unit price. My range would be F2 to F16. So here I am going to mention the range F2 to F16. So I want to search the same value 70. So let's run the process and verify the output. So in the output panel, so we can see the first matched cell number as F5. So let's open the input Excel file. So here in the unit price, so basically we have 70 number is available in the multiple cells. So but it is returning the first matched cell number only. So that is F5. Now let's see how we can search the value in row wise. So I wanted to search the value that is 22 in last row, that is A16 to J16. So let's see how we can do that. So here my range would be A16 to J16. Now I am going to change the value to 22. Now let's save and run the process and verify the output. So in the output panel we can see the first matched cell number as B16. So let's open the input Excel file. So in the B16 we have 22 number is available, right? In case if the value is not found in the input Excel file, then it will going to return empty value. So let me change the value. So let's run and verify the output. So in the output panel we can see empty value, right? Remove duplicates range activity. If you want to remove duplicate rows or duplicate columns data in the input Excel file, we can use the remove duplicates range activity. For this activity, we need to mention the sheet name in which you wanted to remove the duplicates, and then we need to specify the range. So let's see how we can remove the duplicate rows first. In the input Excel file, the data is available from A to J, right? So the range would be A to J. And let me add a few duplicate rows here. Let's save and go back to the UiPath Studio. So here I'm going to mention the range as A to J, right? If I run the process, it will going to remove the duplicate rows if any identified. Then the remaining rows information will move to the upward direction to fill the empty rows, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. So now the duplicates has been removed, right? The data has been moved to the upward direction to fill the empty rows. Now let's see how we can remove the duplicates in the column wise. So in the status, I wanted to remove the duplicates. So here the range would be H2 to H13, right? H2 to H13. So let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. Let's open the input Excel file. Now all the duplicates has been removed and the data has been moved to the upward direction to fill the empty cells, right? Insert or delete columns activity. If you want to add empty columns or to delete the columns in the input Excel file, we can use the insert or delete columns activity. First, let me show you how these insert and delete operations can be done in the Excel file. In the Excel file, the column position number will start from 1. A column position number is 1 and B column position number is 2 and so on. So if you want to create a new column, so what we need to do, we need to select the column position number where you wanted to create a new column, and then we need to right click and click on insert. So as soon as we click on insert, the empty column will be created. From the selected position to end position, whatever the columns are available, those columns will be shifted to right. So let me click on insert. So the new column has been created, and from P1 number to received date columns has been shifted to right. So if I want to create a new column at H position, so the new empty column will be created at a H position, and from line item total to received date, the columns will be shifted to right. In the same way, the deletion operation will work. So first we need to select the column positions which we wanted to delete. So here I am selecting H and I. So after deleting, so the two columns will be deleted, and whatever the remaining columns in the right side, those will be shifted to left side. So let me click on delete. So the two columns has been deleted and the right side of the columns are shifted to left side, right? Now let's see these operations how we can do in the UiPath Studio. For insert or delete columns activity, we need to mention the sheet name in which you wanted to insert or delete the columns. And then we need to specify the column position number from where you wanted to insert or delete the columns. And then we need to specify number of columns, how many columns you wanted to add or you wanted to delete. So in the position, I'm mentioning the 2. So that means it is a B column, and I am going to mention the number of columns as 3. For insert or delete columns activity, we have a property change mode. So here we have two options are available: add and remove. If you select add, the insert operation will be happen, and if you select remove, the deletion operation will be happen. So let's save and run the process and verify the output. The process execution has been completed. So let's open the input file and verify the output. The new 3 empty columns has been added from the column position 2, and the existing columns has been shifted to right. Now let's see how this deletion operation will happen. So here we need to change the change mode to remove. So here I'm selecting the position as 1 and the number of columns I'm mentioning 4. So that means from A to D columns will be deleted and the remaining columns will be shifted to left side, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. So let's open the input Excel file. So from A to D, the columns has been deleted and the remaining columns has been shifted to left side, right? Insert or delete rows activity. If you want to add empty rows or delete the rows in the input Excel file, we can use the insert or delete rows activity. In the Excel file, the row position also start from 1. If we want to create a new row, what we will do? First we will select the row position from where you wanted to create a new row, and then we will right click and click on insert. As soon as we click on insert, the new empty row will be created, and from the selected row to end row, whatever the rows are available, those will be shifted to downside. So let me click on insert. If we want to delete the rows, so we will going to select the row positions which we wanted to delete and then right click, and then we will going to delete. As soon as we click on delete, so those selected rows will be deleted and the below rows will be moved to upward direction, right? So let me show you how these activities will be done in the UiPath Studio. For the insert or delete rows activity, we need to mention the sheet name in which you wanted to insert or delete the rows. Then we need to mention the row position number. So here I'm mentioning the row position as 5 and I'm mentioning the number of rows as 2. So here we have a change mode. So if you select add, so rows will be added. If you select remove, the rows will be deleted. So I'm selecting add. If I run the process, the two new empty rows will be created at the fifth position, and fifth position to end position, whatever the rows are available, those rows will be shifted to downside. So let me open the input Excel file one more time. So here I am going to give a color. Let me save. So let's run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. So at the fifth position, two empty rows has been created and the existing rows has been shifted to downside. Now let's see how we can do the deletion operation. First we need to change the change mode to remove. So here I am going to select the position as 2 and I am going to select the number of rows as 5. If I run the process, from the second row to sixth row the data will be deleted, and from the seventh row to end row the data will be shifted to upward direction. So let's save. So let's run the process and verify the output. From second row to sixth row the data has been deleted, and from the seventh row to end row the data has been shifted to upward direction, right? Get cell color activity. If you want to get the cell color in the input sheet Excel, we can use the get cell color activity. If you apply the direct color, so it will give the color name. If you add the custom color, then it will give the color code. So let me open the input Excel file. In the input Excel file, I have added yellow color for second row and the custom color for fourth row. So let's see how we can extract these colors in the UiPath Studio. For the get cell color activity, we need to mention the sheet name in which you wanted to extract the color, and then we need to mention the cell number. So here I mention the cell number as A2. Then we need to create a variable to store the extracted color. So here I'm mentioning the variable as extracted color. So let me take one log message to display the output. Extracted color dot name. So let's save and run the process and verify the output. So in the output we can see yellow color. Let me open the input Excel file. So in the A2 we have yellow color. So let's see how we can extract the A4 cell color. So here I am going to mention cell number as A4. So let's run the process. So now the color code got extracted because it is a custom color, right? Select range activity. If you want to select any specific range in the input Excel file, we can use the select range activity. For the select range activity, we need to mention the sheet name in which you wanted to select the range, and then we need to specify the range. So here I am going to mention the range as A1 to C10, right? So let me save and let me open the input Excel file. Here I have selected the cell number A4. So if I run this process, so it will going to select the range from A1 to C10, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. Now the range has been selected from A1 to C10, right? Copy sheet activity. If you want to copy the input Excel file sheet, and then if you want to paste in the different Excel file or in the same Excel file, we can use the copy sheet activity. For the copy sheet activity, we need to mention the sheet name which you will going to copy. We need to mention the destination file path. It could be your input Excel file path, or we can mention the different file path. Here I am mentioning the same Excel file path, and then we need to specify the destination sheet name. So here I am mentioning the sheet name as copied sheet, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. So before that, let's verify the sheet names in the input Excel file. So here we have a sheet 1 and sheet 2. So let's run the process. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. The new sheet has been created with the sheet 1 data, right? Here we should note two things. Destination file path. In case if the destination file path is not available, it will going to create a new Excel file. So here I am going to change the destination file path. So I am mentioned as invoice details 1. So let me open the project folder path. So here the invoice details 1 file is not available, right? If I run the process, it will going to copy the sheet 1 in the input Excel file, that is invoice details, and then it will going to create a new Excel file with the invoice details one, and then it will going to add a separate sheet with the name copied sheet, and then it will add all the sheet 1 data, right? So let's run the process and verify the output. So let's go to the project folder. So invoice details one file got created, and let's open the file. So we have a copied sheet got created, and we have a sheet 1 data is available. In case if the destination sheet name is already available in the destination file path, so the copy sheet activity will give us the error. So let me run the process. So in the invoice details one sheet, so the copied sheet is already available, right? So if I run the process, so the copy sheet activity will give us the error. So we are getting the exception, and in the exception message we can see name is already taken. Create table activity. If you want to create a table in the input Excel file sheet, we can use the create table activity. Basically, the tables are helpful in case if we want to filter the data, sort the data, create the charts, pivot tables, and do the data analysis. So these tables will be helpful. So let me open the input Excel file. So this is the input Excel file, and we are in the sheet 1. So here we can create a single table or multiple tables as well. So I wanted to create a table from A to C columns, right? So let's see how we can do that. For the create table activity, we need to mention the sheet name where you wanted to create the table, and then in the table name section we need to mention the table name. So here I am mentioning the name as invoice table 1, and then we need to specify the range. So in this case A to C is the range. Now let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. So the invoice table 1 table got created for A to C columns. So in the table name section we can find the table name that we mentioned in the create table activity. Now let's see how we can create another table in the same sheet. Here I want to create the another table from G to J. So let's see how we can do that. So here I am going to change the range G to J, and then I am going to change the table name to invoice table 2. Let's save and run the process. So let's open the input Excel file. So invoice table 2 table has been created for G to J columns, right? So even we can create a table for empty columns as well. So I wanted to create a table for M and N columns. So let's see how we can do that. So here in the range I am going to mention the range as M to N, and I am going to change the table name to invoice table 3. So let's save and run the process and verify the output. So let's open the input Excel file. So invoice table 3 table has been created for M and N columns, right? Delete column activity. If you want to delete the column in the table in the input Excel file, we can use the delete column activity. So let me open the input Excel file once. Here in the input Excel file, invoice table 1, I wanted to delete the invoice number column. So let's see how we can do that. For the delete column activity, we need to mention the sheet name where the table is available, and then we need to mention the table name. So let me copy the table name. and then we need to mention the column name. So I'm going to delete the invoice number column. So here I'm mentioning the column name as invoice number, right? So let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. So the invoice number column has been deleted, right? Insert column activity. If we want to insert empty column in the table in the input Excel file, we can use the insert column activity. For the insert column activity, we need to mention the sheet name where the table is available, and then we need to mention the table name. In the input Excel file, in the invoice table 1 table, I wanted to add a new column at B position. So basically, in the tables, the column position will start from 0. So let's see how we can add the new column at B position. So let's go back to the UiPath Studio. In the table name section, we need to mention the table name in the sheet. So here I mention the table name as invoice table 1, and we need to mention the inserting column name. So I'm mentioning the column name as a new column, right? And then here we need to specify the position. So I wanted to insert the column at B position. That means the position number is 1, right? So let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. So the new column has been created with the column name new column, right? Create pivot table activity. If you want to create a pivot table in the input Excel file, we can use the create pivot table activity. Basically, these pivot tables are helpful for quickly filter, analyze and summarize the table data in the input Excel file. So let me open the input Excel file. In the input Excel file, in the sheet 1, I have created a table, and the table name is table 1. So let's see how we can create the pivot table by using this table 1. So let's go back to the UiPath Studio. For the create pivot table activity, we need to mention the sheet name where you wanted to create the pivot table. It could be the same name where you created the table, or else we can mention the different sheet name. In case if the sheet name is not available in the input Excel file, the new sheet will be created with that name. Then we need to mention the table name. So here in this case, the table name would be table 1, and then we need to mention the pivot table name. I am mentioning the pivot table name as invoice pivot table. Then we need to mention the range. So this range means in the mentioned sheet name at what position you wanted to create a pivot table. So I am mentioning the starting cell as E2, right? So if I run the process in the sheet 1 at E2 position, the pivot table will be created. So let's run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. In the sheet 1 at E2 position, the standard pivot table has been generated, and here in the pivot table name we can find the pivot table name that we mentioned in the activity. So as per our requirement, we can move these columns to the different areas like filters, columns, values manually. So I wanted to move this status column to the value section. So my pivot table is look like this. Refresh pivot table activity. Basically, for creating the pivot table, we are referring the table name, right? In case if any changes in the that table, let's say if you are deleting the rows or if you added the new data, So the pivot table will not update it automatically. So to update the pivot table, we need to refresh the pivot table. So for the refresh pivot table activity, we need to mention the sheet name where the pivot tables are created, and then we need to mention the pivot table name. Let me add some data here in the table. So now I have added the new data. If you see, the pivot table is not updated. So let's save and go back to the UiPath Studio. So in the pivot table name section, I am mentioning the pivot table name invoice pivot table, right? Now let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. So the data has been updated. So here we have 20 rows are available, right? Get table range activity. If we want to extract the normal table range or pivot table range in the input Excel file, we can use the get table range activity. So let me open the input Excel file. In the input Excel file, in the sheet 1, we have two tables are available, normal table and pivot table. For the get table range activity, we need to mention the sheet name where the tables are created, and then we need to mention the table name for which you wanted to extract the range. So here I am mentioning the normal table name, that is table 1. The output of the get table range activity would be range. So let me create a variable to store the range. Let me take log message to display the output. So in the message section, I am going to pass table range. So let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So in the output panel, we have this extracted range. So I have created the table 1 till the sheet n. So that's the reason we have this number, right? Now let's see how we can extract the pivot table range. So first we need to change the table name. So the pivot table name is invoice pivot table. Then we need to enable this option is pivot checkbox. Let's run the process and verify the output. So in the output panel, we can see the extracted table range E2 to F9. So let me open the input Excel file. So the pivot table starting from E2 and ending at F9, right? Filter table activity. If you want to filter the table data in the input Excel file based on the specific column and its existing values, we can use the filter table activity. So I want to filter while and pending status data in the table. So let's see how we can do that. So for the filter table activity, we need to mention the sheet name where the table is created, and then we need to mention the table name. I'm mentioning the table name as table 1. Here we are filtering the data on the basis of status column, right? So I'm mentioning the column name as status. So here we have filter options. So it should be in the array format, and we wanted to filter void and pending data. So I'm mentioning these two values in the array format, right? So let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. So the data has been filtered with pending and void data, right? Short table activity. If we want to sort the table data on the basis of specific column, we can use the sort table activity. For the sort table activity, we need to mention the sheet name where the table is created, and then we need to mention the table name. I am mentioning the table name as table 1, and I wanted to sort the data on the basis of status column, right? So here we have a order properties available. So here we have two options, so ascending and descending. First I am selecting ascending. So let's save and run the process and verify the output. Now the process execution has been completed. So let's open the input Excel file. So the table data has been sorted on the basis of status in the ascending order, right? Now let's change the order to descending. So let's save and run the process and verify the output. So let's open the input Excel file. Now the table data has been sorted in the descending order on the basis of status column.
With VBA, we can easily create pivot tables and generate the charts, and we can handle large amount of data. In this video, I am going to take three simple scenarios where we can use VBA codes. The first scenario, refreshing pivot tables. For the demonstration purpose, I have created this Excel, and we have a country and continent, and based on this data I have created this pivot table. So basically the pivot table will not get updated as soon as we added the data in the sheet 1. So to update this pivot table, we need to click on refresh all, then only the pivot table will going to be updated. So let me show you one example here. So this data is not updated, so click on refresh all. So now the pivot table is updated. So let's see how we can refresh the pivot tables using the VBA code. So to get the VBA code in simple way, first we will create a macro. In macro we will have a VBA code. So to create the macro, click on view, macros, record macro, and we will going to refresh the pivot tables in the report sheet, and then go to the pivot chart analyzer, click on refresh on, stop the macros recording, view macros, edit, and this is the VBA code to refresh the pivot table. I am going to copy this entire code, go to the studio and go to the project folder. To save this VBA code, I am going to create one text file, and I am going to mention the file name as VBA code. I am going to change the VBA method to meaningful way. So now this is my complete VBA method to update the pivot table. So let's see how we can get the real-time data to update the Excel file, and then how we can use this VBA code to update the pivot tables. To get the real-time data, I am using this application. So let's see how we can implement to get the data and update the VBA code. To get the data, I am using the table extractor. So in this I required only the country and the continent. So to update the data in the Excel, I am going to use Excel applications code. Mention the file name and then I'm going to append the extracted information in the sheet 1. For that I'm going to take append range activity. Now we updated the information in the sheet 1, then our next step is to call the VBA code to update the pivot table. So to call the VBA code, we have an active invoke VBA, mention the VBA code file path, and then we need to mention the method name. That's it. Now close the Excel file. Now run the process and see the output. Now the data got updated and also the pivot table also get updated. The second scenario. So in the second scenario, I just wanted to take all the Asian data and then I wanted to create a separate sheet. So let's see how we can do that. So again, first I'm going to start the recording for macro. So these are the steps I need to follow to copy and paste the Asian data. So this is the required VBA code. So let me copy this entire code, go to the VBA code file and paste. So basically if you observe, this is selecting the static range, so we need to make it as a dynamic. You will get this code in the online Google or ChatGPT. So I'm copying that data and pasting here. What it will do, it will select the sheet 1 and then get the last row and then filter the Asia data, then it will do copy and pasting. So let me change the method name for this. So let me call this VBA code let's run the process and see the output. Now sheet 2 got created with Asian data and the pivot table got updated. The third scenario, I just wanted to give red color to the African continent. So for that, let me start the macro recording. Select Africa continent. The red color. That's it. Stop the recording. Now this is my VBA code. Copy the code. Go to the VBA code notepad file. give the meaningful name. So again here it is a static range, so we need to make it as a dynamic. So I am using the same code here. That's it. So let me call this VBA in the UiPath Studio. So let's run the process and see the output. So the Africa continent data got changed to red, and we have a sheet 2 with Asian data, and the report, the pivot table got updated. So this way we can work with VBA code in the Excel automation in UiPath Studio. Video. So if you see the Asia data, so every time it will going to filter the Asia data, and then it will copy and paste in the separate sheet, right? So in this video I am going to explain how we can pass this continent data to the method, and then accordingly this VBA method will going to filter the data and do the copy pasting, right? So like in the C#, .NET and Java and Python, when you create a method, we will have a method parameters option is there. Yes. In the same way, in VBA code also we have a method parameters concept is there. So at the time of creating the method, we will pass the method parameters. When you are calling the method, then we will mention the values, right? So let me add the method parameters here. I am passing the continent name as a method parameter, and I am going to replace this Asia value with the method parameter, and I am saving the file. Then I am going to the UiPath Studio, taking the Excel application scope and mentioning the input file path, and to execute the VBA code I am using the invoke VBA activity. So here we need to mention the VBA code file path, and then we need to mention the method name. In the invoke VBA activity we have a one property entry method parameter. So here we need to mention the method parameters in the list form. So in the method parameters, so the country name I am going to mention as a Latin America. So what will happen? So this method will filter the Latin America data, and then with that data it will create the separate sheet. So let me execute this process and see the output. The process got completed. So let me open the input file. Yeah, the another sheet got created with Latin America data. Let me show you another example. Africa data color change method, we are filtering the Africa data, and then we are giving the red color, right? So here I am mentioning the method parameters in the same way, replacing this Africa name with method parameter and save. So in the method name, I'm going to mention the method name as Africa data color change, and in the entry method parameters, I'm going to mention the continent name as Europe, right? So now when I execute, it will filter the Europe data, and then it will give the red color. The process got completed, so let me go to the project folder. Yeah, so the Europe data got filtered and then red color got applied, right? So let me take another example by taking multiple method parameters. So in the Africa data color change, we have mentioned the continent. So in the same way, I'm going to mention the color as well in the method parameter. So here I am going to mention the parameter name as color code as long. So if you see the color, it is in the numeric format, so that's the reason I mentioned the data type as long. So I am going to replace this color code with this numeric value and save. So while mentioning the entry method parameter, so we need to follow the same order. So to get this color code, so we can do one thing. We can open the Excel and view record macro, green color, stop macro, view macro, edit, and then we will have a code for that. I am taking this value, right? Let me close the Excel file. Let me execute the process and see the output. So let me open the Excel file. Yeah, the Europe data got filtered and the green color has been applied. So this way we can work with VBA and we can pass the dynamic values to the VBA, then we can execute. To work with macros, the Excel format should be macro enabled Excel and the file extension would be .xlsm. If you are create the macros in the regular Excel, that is .xlsx, the macros we will be able to create, but if you are close and reopen the Excel, we will not be able to find the macros that we have created. So let me create simple macro and let me close and reopen. Let's see what will happen. Go to view to create the macro, record the macro, give the name, just select the data and copy, stop the recording. So now the macro got created. So let me save the Excel, close and reopen the Excel. If you go to view the macros are not available, right? So let me save this Excel to macro enabled Excel format. Click on file, save as, select the folder location, select the type as Excel macro enabled workbook, then save. Okay, so I just wanted to create a macro to filter the countries which are starting with character A. So the macro creation can be done in two ways. We can manually write the VBA code, or else simply we can record the macro, then the VBA code will generate automatically. Right? The simplest way is to record the macro, then if needed, then we can modify the VBA code. So to record the macro, we need to go to the view, record macro, give the name, then we need to follow the steps to filter the data. So text filter, begin with character A, click on OK, then stop the recording, then view macros, edit macro. Now this is the macro to filter the countries which are starting with A. If needed, we can change the macro name. I am going to change the macro name with filter data, then save. Then save the Excel. Before that, let me remove the filter. Save, close the Excel. Let's see how we can run the macro in the UiPath Studio. First, we need to take the Excel application scope. Then we need to select the file. To execute the macros, we have an activity, execute macro. So here we need to provide the macro name. Filter data. Right? So let me run the process and see the output. So the data got filtered, right? So now let's see how we can make this macro method as dynamic. So for that, so let's go to the macros, edit macro. So let's see how we can make this method as a dynamic. To do that, first we need to add the method parameters, and at the time of calling we need to pass this method parameter values. So here I am going to mention the method parameter as start char as string, and then we need to change this expression right. So what will happen? So whenever we are calling this macro, we need to pass the character. So based on that, the data will go into filter, right? So let's save the Excel. So here for execute macro, we have a property macro parameter. So here we need to pass the parameters in the list form. So whatever the order that we have mentioned while creating the macro, the same order we need to mention the values here. So here I just wanted to filter the countries which are starting with I. So let's run the process and see the output. Right? So the country's data filtered with I character.
Hope this video is helpful. Thanks for watching this video. Have a nice day.